There was no obstruction and none whatsoever. And it was a complete and total exoneration.
Well, he couldn't be happier, could he? President Trump cleared by the Mueller investigation of colluding with Russia to win the 2016 election. It is a big boost for the US president, who called the probe a witch hunt all along. But is it really over? His political opponents say it is not. They sniff a rat and want to see Mueller's full report, not just a summary from the Trump-appointed Attorney General. And at the same time, they're preparing to challenge Trump for the presidency next year. We're going to be taking a look at the runners and riders in just a moment. But first, a quick look at how we imagine the news broke across the otherwise tranquil America.
The long-awaited moment is here. The report of Special Counsel Robert Mueller has finally been submitted.
Robert Mueller has just turned in the highly anticipated report of his investigation.
It was just announced there was no collusion with Russia. It was a complete and total exoneration.
How can they let Trump off the hook? How can that happen?
Mueller findings released: no obstruction, no collusion.
He has rendered his verdict. There is no collusion.
Thousands of documents, hundreds of witnesses, 2,800 subpoenas. What did you find on Russian collusion? Nothing. Why? Because there was none.
Democrats couldn't understand or fathom how he was elected, and they went all in on this one, and now they all look like ignorant fools and idiots.
You've got a president who loves this country, who's committed to this country, and yet each and every day there were lies after lies after lies told about him.
Save your breath, all right? We're not going to divert our eyes. This president lies more than any other president.
It does not at all clear him of any other crimes.
Oh, here we go. Colluded with Russia. There you go. No. Fair's fair.
Half of America is upset that our president didn't collude with Russia. Seems like we should probably be happy about that, shouldn't we?
President Trump is planning to use the apparent conclusion of Robert Mueller's report to attack his foes.
There are a lot of people out there that have done some very, very evil things, very bad things, I would say treasonous things.
They abandon all standards, all personal ethics, all professional duty.
You guys on this network, what have I done? Have tortured this man for 2 years with collusion, and nobody's apologized.
First of all,
collusion.
No collusion. Okay, here's my case.
Collusion.
Here's my case.
Apologize.
Never. Here's my case.
Never?
It's really the Democrats with their media lackeys creating a narrative that they want to be true because they couldn't explain the outcome of the last election.
Well, we have a great panel for you, as always. In the red corner, we have Mika Mosbacher, who is part of President Trump's 2020 Advisory Board. Hello. Her tag team partner, Jan Halper-Hayes, part of Trump's transition team. Over in the blue corner, we have Basil Smikle, the former executive director of the New York Democratic Party. And joining us from Washington once again, we have the veteran journalist, Simon Marks. Thank you all for joining us. So just to be clear, Robert Mueller was looking into whether the president colluded with Russia and obstructed justice. Let's deal with collusion first. And here's the Attorney General's report, quoting directly from Mueller's report. The investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. Let's go to Simon Marks first of all. Simon, you think that people would be entirely happy now across DC, across the country, that there was no collusion. Is that correct?
I'm not sure why anybody would be entirely happy, Matt, given that no one has read the Mueller report. We have seen 101 words of a report that is purported to run between 700 and 1,000 pages. And those words have been selected by the Attorney General of the United States, William Barr, a man who was appointed by one President Donald Trump around a month before Robert Mueller's report dropped on his desk. In the absence of the Mueller report being publicly disseminated, it's impossible to know whether those quotes were selective. It's impossible to know just how much information Robert Mueller gathered about activities that may have been collusive with the Russians. And it's also impossible to know what conclusions his counterintelligence investigation reached as well.
Simon, you say that, but then we do have a lot of responses from some very senior Democrats. We also have, for example, the country's top lawyer under President Obama, former Attorney General Eric Holder. Here's what he had to say on it.
Does the lack of the conspiracy indictment clear Donald Trump of collusion?
I think it does. I mean, on the basis of what I have seen, I've not seen the Mueller report, but certainly on the basis of the letter that Attorney General Barr put together, it would seem to me that that is a substantial finding there, and I think it's good news for for the president and for his campaign.
I want to bring in Basil for a moment. Basil Smykel, amongst Democrats, is there satisfaction now that there was no collusion?
Satisfaction, probably not. I don't think that's the word. I would say there's some conclusion or some finality basically based on what Eric Holder said, that the Attorney General has essentially made a ruling, and that we have to do one of two things. We have to A, continue to ask for the entire report to be public, and B, actually move on politically.
Basil, Donald Trump and one of his lawyers, Rudy Giuliani, say they want the full report to come out. If it comes out, and it does concur with the report from the Attorney General that there was no collusion, will Democrats be delighted that there was no collusion, or will they be secretly disappointed that they can't use it to get rid of President Trump?
I don't even think you need the word secretly in there. I think both publicly and privately they're going to be disappointed because, I don't think there's a Democrat out there that believes that in some way, shape, or form his campaign did not engage with the Russians. We heard Donald Trump in a rally egg them on to investigate Hillary Clinton, among others.
Well, isn't that the point of the Mueller investigation? Why else would he employ 40 FBI agents, 19 lawyers, issue 500 search warrants, and listen to the testimony from 500 witnesses?
Well, listen, what may rise to the level of collusion legally may not satisfy anybody politically, and I totally get that. But I've always felt that what this investigation was doing was essentially reverse engineering a lot of the vetting that probably should have occurred when Donald Trump was running in 2016. Having said that, and the fact that we are now at the end of this investigation, again, I don't think there's a Democrat around that doesn't believe that there was some collusion, but we can't hang our hat on that. That is not a winning strategy for us.
Okay, Basil, thank you. Let's bring in Jan Halper-Hayes now. She's been speaking to some very senior Republicans in D.C. who just come back from Washington. What is the atmosphere amongst the senior Republicans?
Oh, it's beyond relieved. It's elated as well. And before the Mueller report came out, 53% of the population, not, a partisan issue, but a nonpartisan response, they believed it was a witch hunt. So you've got 53% that felt that Trump was being treated unfairly. And now we can go on and win 2020.
But we've got Mika Mosbacher here. She's actually on the 2020 campaign. Mika, you're in D.C. You're steeped in D.C. politics. And you've been speaking to some senior Republicans. What has been the reaction from them?
The reaction is that many of us felt that President Trump was innocent from the very beginning. That's one of the reasons you've seen these tweets. Yes, they're very aggressive, but this was a man who felt he had been unfairly targeted, and he was defending himself. This report, which cost taxpayers over $25 million, we could have used the money for the wall, is probably going to go down in history as one of the most thorough investigations ever. And it's interesting, too, that we are now seeing the Democrats trying to impugn the reputation of not only Mueller, who served under Clinton and Obama and 12 years as an FBI director, but they're also trying to impugn Attorney General Barr. And there's a very important sentence in this 4-page summary that has been often overlooked by the news media, and it is that not only did no member of the Trump campaign, associate, or an American collude or cooperate with Russia, they did so despite many attempts by bad actors and Russian intelligence to do so. So they had the opportunity, and they have been completely cleared. The Trump family has been vindicated. There are no sealed indictments, no indictments. And so the president's going to take a victory lap tonight in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and the Republicans will be cheering.
Okay, well, let's look at the other focus of Mueller's investigation now, obstruction of justice. The conclusion here is far less accepted by the president's critics. Here's the Attorney General's report saying that Mueller was looking into a number of actions by the president, most of which have been the subject of public reporting. Simon, I just want to come back to you. What is he referring to? Which subjects have been publicly reported?
Well, I think he's referring there, and until we see the Mueller report, we won't know, but I think he's referring there to the president's ubiquitous tweets regarding particularly the firing of former FBI Director James Comey and the interview that he gave to NBC's anchorman Lester Holt, in which President Trump clearly indicated that the reason he fired James Comey was because he wanted the Russia investigation to come to an end. He also indicated something very similar in his conversation with Russian officials in the White House shortly after James Comey was fired. So this is an indication that Robert Mueller appeared to be thinking that Donald Trump was convicted by his own public comments. But again, till we see the report, we won't know.
Amika, come in for a second.
In regard to Director James Comey, who did not adhere to best practices, he leaked to the press through a Columbia professor. He made a statement in October regarding Hillary Clinton that her actions had been careless in terms of her email server that was at home that apparently had classified information on it, but he didn't charge her. And many Democrats were upset with Comey, too. They felt that he had actually hurt Hillary Clinton going forward in 2016 campaign. So the president had, within his constitutional right, the authority to fire James Comey. He had lost faith in him. And going forward, the Democrats continue to say that President Trump would interfere with the Mueller campaign. He would fire Special Counsel Mueller. He did not. It was floated that the White House would receive an advance copy of the Mueller report or the Barr summary. It has not. President Trump has not interfered at all in any aspect of this. And I'm not an attorney, but I have been told that you cannot charge someone with obstruction where there is no crime.
So we'll just get into that right now, actually. So on this obstruction issue, the Attorney General again directly quotes from the Mueller report, and he says, while this report does not conclude that the president committed a crime, it also does not exonerate him. President Trump, though, seems to have heard rather differently.
This was an illegal takedown that failed. And hopefully somebody's going to be looking at the other side. So it's complete exoneration, no collusion, no obstruction. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Let's just bear in mind that the Attorney General Barr was already of the opinion that the obstruction theory was, quote, fatally misconceived and based on a novel and legally insupportable reading of the law. Come back to you for a moment, Simon. So what we have is an Attorney General who, before he was in that position, volunteered a 19-page analysis saying that it was, fatally misconceived.
Yes, I mean, I think it's absolutely apparent that there's no coincidence about William Barr's nomination to be Donald Trump's Attorney General, succeeding, of course, Jeff Sessions, who found himself completely beleaguered in the role. The White House could be confident that William Barr would find a way of handling the receipt of the Mueller report and, at least over the short term, the transmission of its contents. It's also worth making the point, Matt, that earlier you were saying that Donald Trump himself has said he wants the entire Mueller report to be published. That's not actually the case. The report is now being scrubbed for what is described as confidential and other information. So it's far from clear that the entire report will be published.
Yeah, but that's standard legal stuff, isn't it? I mean, let's go to Jan. Yeah. Jan, the things that they want redacted are for legal purposes that are quite commonplace.
Well, absolutely. One thing is that if they were questioning someone and it was negative about them, and they weren't indicted, you can't let the public see that. That has to be redacted. And any bit of the grand jury information will have to be redacted. But it's very interesting to me because we're focusing just on Barr. And Rod Rosenstein was there with him all weekend going through it. And Rod Rosenstein was the one that hired Mueller and also supervised him. And they came out and said that Mueller covered all of the bases, and we need to give some credence to Rod Rosenstein's role in this, given he wanted to wear a wire to try and trap the president. So we've got Barr, who really thinks that this was somewhat out of place to do. And we've got Rod Rosenstein, who was part of the side that really wanted it to happen. I think that we need to give initial credence to the summary that Barr and Rosenstein put together.
Well, Trump is clearly feeling vindicated. He had called it a witch hunt all along. And it's clear he'd like the politicians and journalists to pay the price of crossing him.
Cold, hard evidence of the Trump campaign, indeed the Trump family, eagerly intending to collude possibly with Russia.
If there was not collusion, there was at least the effort to collude.
There's plenty of evidence of collusion or conspiracy in plain sight.
I believe there was collusion.
No, it's starting to smell more and more like collusion.
Looks and smells a whole lot like collusion.
And they're confessing to colluding with the Russians.
There was collusion. There was an attempt at collusion.
Do you still believe the president could be a Russian asset?
I think it's possible.
It was a false narrative. It was a terrible thing. We can never let this happen to another president again.
Back to Mika Mosbacher now for a moment. Mika, a lot of the press are saying that President Donald Trump is full of vengeance. Is that right?
No. The focus is on the origin of this investigation, and Senator Lindsey Graham, who chairs the Judiciary Committee, has already indicated that he will begin to subpoena individuals to come in, including Attorney General Barr. But what they're looking at is the origin of this, the origin, first of all, of the FISA warrants, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, and the fact that they were based on the Steele dossier. And don't take my words for it. Comey said that the dossier was salacious and unverifiable. This seems to have been the beginning of targeting perhaps innocent people and impugning reputations of those individuals, including Carter Page, that were had warrants to spy on them. So that's first of all, is looking also at some of the bad actors in the Department of Justice, including Lisa Page and Peter Strzok and Andy McCabe, who've either been demoted or fired. So I think that what we're interested in is trying to restore the reputation of the Department of Justice, and certainly Attorney General Barr has his work cut out for him, because there is a stain on the department, especially when it appears that individuals were politically motivated to impact the campaign and hurt and target President Trump.
Basil, I want to just come over to you for a moment. We saw in that very quick report a number of Democrat politicians. Do you think they went too far in saying that there was collusion? And are they now concerned that they will be the target of some sort of investigation themselves?
Well, I don't know about the latter. I doubt that they're going to be that concerned about targeting in any investigation. But I will say, and I've said this publicly before, I think that there were some that did go too far, because not only, I wouldn't say that we raised expectations, although I do think there's some of that, but I also think that we were talking a lot about impeachment at a time when the American people really wanted us to talk more about policy, which you're hearing a lot more now. But there were some that probably did take it a bit too far. But listen, but one thing is true. We do know that the Russians influenced our election. We know that.
That was in the report, yes. We know that. We know that the Russians influenced our election. Yeah, all the intelligence agencies are saying so, but
right.
there's no.
And
they're saying there's no coordination and no conspiracy with the Trump campaign. Simon, I want to come to you for a moment. I need to ask you something about journalists. What is the atmosphere like for journalists in Washington, and do you think it's only going to get harder as a result of this?
Well, I mean, the atmosphere for journalists in Washington has been complicated since President Trump became president of the United States and began describing the news media as fake and the enemy of the people. I think that many journalists in this town are very hardened against that. They're very used to it at this point. And again, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but we haven't seen the Mueller report, so it's very hard to know to what extent journalists may have been misled by sources. The one thing we do know for certain is that there was outreach by the Russians to the Trump campaign, and that the Trump campaign didn't do what all previous campaigns have done and reported that outreach to the FBI. It'll be very interesting to see what the Mueller report has to say about that.
Yes, Simon, it's hard to know how much has been reported by other campaigns. If we don't know about it, we don't know about it. We don't know that we don't know about it, if you know what I mean. Let me move on to something else now, the 2020 election, which is very important. How does this all affect the 2020 election? Is Donald Trump more likely now to get 4 more years? We'll get to that in a moment. But first, let's look at some of the Democrats lining up to take on Trump.
I am a candidate for President of the United States.
I'm running to serve you as the next President of the United States of America.
I am running for President of the United States.
I'm running for President.
This is the fight of our lives. The fight to build an America where dreams are possible, an America that works for everyone.
We are truly now, more than ever, the last great hope of Earth.
The American dream and our American democracy are under attack and on the line like never before.
With your help, we are going to transform this country.
Former Vice President Joe Biden could be on the brink of announcing a run for the White House.
He's leading the charge, way ahead of the rest of the field, even though Biden hasn't officially declared that he's even running yet.
But on Saturday, he may have accidentally spilled the beans.
I have the most progressive record of anybody running for the United States, anybody who would run.
Well, it's still a long way to go, but let's see how this latest episode in US politics is going to affect the race. Basil, who do you like out of the range of runners and riders so far?
You know, I have to say, I don't have a horse in this race right now.
Why? Is that because Joe Biden's not in it?
I've said for a while that if Joe had gotten into the race, that he would be difficult to beat. Not impossible, but it would be difficult.
You expect him to come in?
It would be difficult because he's got these relationships with the Democratic activists across the country. But I would tell you, with Bernie Sanders doing very well in the polls, and you've got Beto O'Rourke and others who are now bubbling up to the top, it's going to be a tight race. We've got a school bus full of great candidates. So I'm actually just sitting back and watching right now.
What do you think Barr's report of Mueller's report does for Trump's chances and for your candidate's chances?
So there are two things. One, about 6 months ago, when you would talk to Democrats, just ordinary Democrats on the street, voters, they had some feeling in the back of their mind that Trump would be reelected. I think the Barr report for Republicans has emboldened them to say that, yes, it's more likely now than before that he would be reelected. But I would tell you, for the first time in a long time, we're actually talking about good policy. And that's actually very encouraging for a lot of Democrats, and particularly for commentators or consultants like me, because that's one of the things that we heard a lot from voters, that they wanted us to focus more on policy.
Mika Mosbacher, you're on the Trump 2020 Advisory Board. How does this latest episode affect morale there for the campaign?
Well, the morale has always been good. You know, I don't look at polling, I look at fundraising, and the fact that the RNC last election cycle raised over $225 million. So campaign, it's robust. They're coming in with small dollars. My money's on Beto O'Rourke, and I'll tell you why. He raised $80 million against an incumbent senator in a red state of Texas, and was able to raise $6 million in 24 hours after he announced his candidacy. And he's Kennedy-esque and charismatic, and I think he's someone to watch. I think it's going to be a very interesting contest to watch.
I think it looks more like John Kerry than he does John F. Kennedy, but okay. Mika Mosbacher, thank you very much. Thank you also Jan Halper-Hayes, and also Basil Smykel, and also Simon Marks. Thank you also. Well, spare a thought for those liberal satirists and talk show hosts who have been spending the last 2 years every night, every day, milking this situation to great comedic effect. But at least they've had the good grace to see the error of their ways.
So now that Barr says, that Mueller says, there's no proof of collusion, a lot of people want Trump's critics to apologize. I will start. I'm sorry that you're a terrible president.
And that last one for the Dems in the House. That's all we have time for this week. Remember, if you want to see this or any of our previous episodes, you can check out our YouTube channel. But for now, thank you for watching, and see you next week.